واحد واحد واحد. صوت 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 صوت. 1 2 3 4 اخوات. صوت 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 صوت. 1 2 صوت صوت صوت. تست تست. 1 2 1 2 1 2. صوت 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 صوت. بعد 11. صوت صوت. تشيك الصوت يا ماهر. 1 2 3 1 2 3. صوت 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 صوت. شرفك الكابل. صوت صوت. تيست 1 2 3. وين راح المصور؟ اختفى. صوت صوت. تبعته كله.
حطه هنا نجيبه.
هذا اضبط لك اياه.
لا هنا خليه هنا. ها تكلف. لا وقع. لا انا قريب علي هذا قريب علي اخي.
شباب رجعتوا حركتوها.
لا تمام.
بس بدنا نسكر المايك.
ها
وطيه شباب.
هم محتاج
على جافرها ما داعي على اللوك.
بس تشيك الصوت.
ما مشكلة. لا هذا يسوي لنا مشكلة وياه.
اوكي نرتب البلاستر. هذا البلاستر. شنو ما تقدر؟
تشيك مايك
صوت 1 2 3. ماهر صوت تيست. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. صوت يا محمد. 1 2 3. صوت 1 2 3 1 2 3. صوت 1 2 3 1 2 3. 1 2 3 1 2 3. صوت واحد. اسمعي. صوت 1. صوت 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. تست 1 2 1 2 1 2 3. ما
حاطين عليه اللوجو بس.
تست 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3.
ها مطفي هذا طبي. هلو
لما تبدأ المؤتمر just remember to tell them to put all their phones on silent.
اوكي اشتغل الو ايه بس بدهم اياه الزلمه حطوه مشان هيك وهيدي وقفه.
هذه
حاطينها هي شو عملتوا؟ لا شيلها هيديك حطها رجع. هذا اللي شالوا مايكروفون تبعهم مشان بطل يطلع.
هذا مال الهندسة الصوتية ما له دخل
شرقية
بس لوجو هذا.
بليز تعالوا ظبط لهيدا وقعت لأن. والثاني وين؟ وهيدا بده يتظبطوا يتلزقوا.
هذا ما يصير.
لا لأنه ما يصير. ما يصير.
عصبي.
لزقها بشي محل.
يلا يلا، انا قلت لصاحبك ترى قال لي خليها.
ما بصاحبه منو صاحبه؟ هو واحد.
الو الو الو. تست.
اسف انا حبيبي عمري انت. هذا شنو السماء الشرقيه؟ هذا وين اخليه؟
بس فيك الفدي.
ايه بس ما بيلزق ما بيلزق ما بيلزق.
خليه وسامي.
ظبطها.
اوكي. مطالع شلون لين شل عندي بالك لين شل.
زين هذا شنو هذا؟
هذا ما يقبل يخلي بيه شو اسمه. بس انا وين اخلي اللوجو مالتي باخر وقت؟ تاخذ ضايع. هذا منو دا يحكي؟ هذا منو ما دا يحكي؟ مساوي وين اخليها؟
فيك تجيبها هون.
لا خليها
هون.
لا هذا هو السادات.
هيدي هون بدك تجيبها هون. بدك تجيبها هون جيبها هون.
شو اسوي؟ اعطيني بس خليها.
جيبها هالجهة.
وين؟
بدك تحطها هون.
دقيقة واحدة بس دقيقة
ما
واحدة.
تعود
خلي
ما تعود تحركوا شيء.
زين لين نجيب هذا شوي.
ما ينزلون صح.
هذا ما يجي شنو؟
ما يجي.
يلا.
أبد؟
يلا هسه قبل شوي خليها هيك خليها هنا ما تجي غير حل ما تجي والله شو وين بعيد والله
تيست هنا تيست صوت مع الترجمه.
بس اشرح لي بالك يشرح الكلمات. اوف روح شوف هنا
خليها هيك عادي.
خلص.
يلا سال خلصنا.
بتوقع إذا وقعت شو؟
وقعت خلي تروح.
الو تيست. عملوا تيست على العربي كمان على الانجليزي على
حط عليها تيب ثاني من ورا. حط عليها تيب.
ما بيلزق التيب عليها. ما بيلزق عليها التيب كذا مرة. الو خلص كله تيست.
I think you need the volume is not isn't enough. Is it speak?
الو بعد test 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 test 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 test.
هذا اللي هو خاص بالقاعة.
ايه
يكون يعني أوضح شيء بالنسبة لنا.
اوكي كثير منيح هيك
نسوي تيست عليه.
تيست 1 2 3 4 5 منيح. يلا تيست كثير منيح. تيست 1 2 3 4 5 هذا بيتعلى شوي صغيرة. ايه تيست 1 2 3 4 5 منيح هيك. ايه خلص شباب ما خلص بليز ما تدقروا شيء لانه على الاخر ما لا شباب.
It's 11 o'clock. I think we can tell them to put their phones on silent now.
بلغ الضيوف عن وقتكم السلسلة.
ايه
هاي أهم خطوة.
هلا شو هيدا الابيض صار. اوكي هذا شو
واد نزلته بعد وين
خلص شباب خلص. لا ما فيك تحط شيء هون. حطه هون اذا بدك.
اوكي
حطه هون اذا بدك. تسجيل مين؟ مين؟
تسجيل وكالة وكالة
أي وكالة؟
يعني تسجيل صوتي
مين؟
استخدم بفضائية التركمانية استخدم الترجمة.
أوكي. شكرا. أهلا وسهلا بالجميع. لو سمحتوا شوية هدوء. تفضلوا الحاضرين، وبنطلب منكم رجاء تحطوا الموبايلز على سايلنت حتى يكون في شوية تركيز. أهلا وسهلا بالجميع. صباح الخير. بداية أرحب بكم في هذا المؤتمر الصحفي للممثلة الخاصة للأمين العام للأمم المتحدة ورئيسة بعثة الأمم المتحدة لمساعدة العراق يونامي السيدة جانين هاينس بلاسخارت، وإلى جانبها كل من الدكتور أمير أراين وهو رئيس فريق المساعدة الانتخابية المتكامل وكبير المستشارين الانتخابيين، والسيد محمد النجار مدير مكتب الشؤون السياسية في بعثة يونامي. المؤتمر اليوم يتعلق بموضوع الانتخابات المقبلة والتحضيرات الجارية وجهود الأمم المتحدة ذات الصلة. في البداية ستلقي السيدة هانيس بلاسخارت كلمة، وبعدها سيكون باب الأسئلة مفتوح أمام السيدات والسادة الإعلاميين عن الانتخابات وما يتصل بها بعد تعريف كل متحدث عن نفسه ووسيلة الإعلام التي يمثلها. أترك الآن الكلمة للسيدة هانيس بلاسخارت للتفضل بكلمتها، وشكرا. Ms. Asaraji, the floor is yours.
Can you see me? It's like this? Okay. Sabakum ala badkhair, I'm Saida Bilikakum. I will speak in English, but you will have translation. First of all, let me thank you for attending this press conference. It's really good to see all of you. The floor will be yours for any question you might have within the context of the upcoming elections. But I would like to start with some opening remarks, if you allow me. Now, not surprisingly, today's press conference will focus on Iraq's all-important elections, which will be held on October 10. The clock is ticking, with less than 5 weeks left until Iraq goes to the polls. As most of you know, I recently traveled to New York to brief the UN Security Council on the situation in Iraq, devoting nearly my entire statement to the UN Security Council on the elections. Now, one thing was very clear to me: the world is watching closely. Like the Iraqi people, nobody wishes to see a repetition of the events in 2018. In other words, the importance of credible Iraqi elections is widely recognized. Now, as you know, in October 2019, many Iraqis took to the streets. They were protesting a lack of economic, social, and political prospects. And one of their central demands was the holding of early elections. 2 years later, that demand is being met. Elections will be held. And there is no denying it. These elections were hard-earned. As I said in New York, the United Nations will, as ever, be a partner to Iraq and the Iraqi people. While these elections are Iraqi-owned and Iraqi-led, we have been providing and will continue to provide advice and technical assistance. Our technical advisors are supporting IHAC in a range of areas, from ballot paper printing to advice on COVID-19, from recruitment and training of polling staff to security planning, from developing electoral regulations and procedures to strengthening processes and systems. The UN also assists IHEC in conducting simulation exercises. And I could go on and on. But to cut a long story short, the overall objective of UN efforts in support of the relevant Iraqi authorities, the overall objective of our efforts is the conduct of credible elections. Now, I often get asked whether the October elections will be different from the elections in 2018. And in response, I point to the facts, such as a new electoral system has been put in place. Voters will now vote for individuals, not just for political parties. Before, there were 18 constituencies, now there are 83. And experience elsewhere in the world shows us that a voting for individuals and smaller constituencies can create a stronger bond between voters and their representatives. To boost transparency and increase trust, an independent audit firm will be keeping tabs on how the votes are counted and what happens with the results. For the first time, and to emphasize IHEC's independence, judges are serving as election commissioners. This time, to help prevent fraud, provisional results will be shown in real time at result display centers throughout the country. The UN is deploying a much bigger team to support the elections. In fact, this is one of the UN's largest electoral technical assistance projects worldwide, with 5 times as many UN personnel as in 2018. In addition to that, 130 additional international experts are in the process of being deployed to monitor in advance and on election day. They come with around 600 additional supporting staff. Meanwhile, new measures are in place to mitigate the misuse of electronic voter cards, or in other words, the non-biometric voter cards. For example, after voting, the cards will be confiscated and disabled for 72 hours. Old non-biometric voter cards, which voters, for example, turned in when they received their new biometric voting cards, these old cards have been collected by IHEC and will be destroyed at any moment, most likely today or tomorrow. So, ladies and gentlemen, while I am reflecting on ongoing efforts and measures in place, I can confirm that the UN does believe that the October elections have the potential to be different from the elections in 2018. But I also have to stress that no matter how many technical measures are being put in place, it is up to the political forces and candidates to collectively refrain from any attempt to force or distort election results. It is up to them to stop the buying of loyalties, voter suppression, and/or any other intentional illegal action. It is up to them to collectively lead by example. Now, what does that mean? It means that there is no place for any impropriety, and that includes pressuring individuals to vote for specific candidates. For instance, by threatening to withhold salaries and using official positions in an illegitimate manner. It also includes the buying and selling of votes, as well as, for instance, the intimidation of candidates and voters by threatening to release all kinds of information about them. This is all unacceptable. And to those candidates who think they can offer, let's say, $200 per vote, and in return receive a photo proving that the voter has indeed voted for that candidate. To those candidates, I would like to say, you are wasting your money mobile phones and cameras will this time not be allowed inside voting booths. Now, needless to say, any and all illegal actions threaten the credibility of the October elections. Hence, the United Nations support all efforts to prevent, report and punish such actions. Now let me repeat, as I said in New York, in the interest of Iraq's young democracy, it is crucial to deliver an electoral process that will be recognized as credible. Now, also key to establishing public trust is inclusivity. In that regard, we will continue to encourage the full and meaningful participation by women, both as candidates and voters. For example, we are working with civil society organizations to monitor and report political gender-based violence and hate speech against female candidates. We also provide small grants to local NGOs to undertake civic and voter education activities targeting female voters as a key demographic group. Other groups that need to be brought into the fold include youth, first-time voters, socially excluded and vulnerable groups, internally displaced persons and returnees, minorities and persons with disabilities. Now, just an example how to make this happen. The United Nations recruited, for instance, a sign language interpreter to assist IHEC. And we also support IHEC on the production of graphics and videos aimed at women, persons with disabilities and IDPs. And yes, I cannot overemphasize the important role of young people in the upcoming elections. With 60% of Iraq's population being 25 years old or younger, these elections offer a new generation of Iraqis the chance to make its voice heard. Now, through my discussions with Iraqis across the spectrum, I of course have heard the calls for a boycott of the elections. And the reasons for such calls vary, from disillusionment, mistrust, anger, and loss of hope, to being not ready and apparent political positioning. But as I emphasized before, while the feelings of disillusionment are very well understood, boycotting the elections will not solve anything. On the contrary, if you do not vote, you end up boosting those whose positions you may oppose. Now, we do know that Iraq needs deep structural reforms, but such reforms require unwavering determination, immense patience, and lots of time. Meanwhile, democracy is always a work in progress, and it can be tedious. It is not easy to balance interests and opinions. But if people feel included, if they feel they can help shape their own futures, then the compromises and investments are more than worth it. Now, dear members of the press, I also have a message for you, and that is about misinformation. We continue to see that falsehoods are gaining traction and becoming accepted as truth. There are misperceptions about IHEC, about protesters, about government officials, about political rivals, and yes, also, at times, about the United Nations. But it must be clear to all of us, fake news, conspiracies, misinformation only sow distrust. They can turn people against each other, and they can derail credible elections. So we are counting on you as well. We are counting on you to make sure that reporting is accurate. In other words, your role in ensuring a credible process is also essential. Stick to the facts. Deliberately feeding into all kinds of misinformation or randomly spreading stories is truly risky business. Now, last but not least, before taking your questions, allow me to reiterate the following to, in particular, the Iraqi people. The UN is with you. Your goal is our goal. To see Iraq emerge from uncertainty and division as a country in which all of its citizens have the chance to be heard and to succeed. Now, the very first step on the very long road to achieving that is to cast your ballot. This is your country, your future, your vote. Thank you very much.
شكرا السيدة هانيس بلاسخارت. سوف يكون لاحقا نسخة متوفرة عن كلمة الممثلة الخاصة للأمين العام للأمم المتحدة في العراق باللغتين العربية والإنجليزية على موقع البعثة uniraq.org. نرجو من الزملاء الإعلاميات والإعلاميين التفضل بالأسئلة حول الانتخابات وجهود الأمم المتحدة وما يتصل بها بعد التعريف عن نفسه ووسيلة الإعلام التي تمثلها. والوسائل الإعلام بإمكانكم نقل الميكروفونز إذا بتحبوا 5 دقائق، إذا بتحبوا تنقلوا اللوجوز وهيك أو ماشي الحال، لأنه الكلام حيكون هوني، الكلام حيكون على الطاولة. معليش لا بدهم يحكوا تحت، فيكم تنقلوهم. اوكي انه بتفضلوا انه السؤال ينطرح واللي بده يحكي بيحكي على اوكي ستيج. طيب تفضلوا بالاسئله، ولكن كل متحدث يعرف عن نفسه ووسيله الاعلام التي تمثلها، ورجاء ابقاء الاسئله موجزه لافساح المجال لطرح العدد الاكبر من الاسئله. وشكرا. تفضل. لحظة. You don't have this here.
شكرا جزيلا. أنا مصطفى قران من شبكة رودا والإعلامية الكردية. السؤال: وما هي حجم المساعدات الأمم المتحدة والدول عن طريق الأمم المتحدة تساعدون العراق من أجل الانتخابات؟ وما هي عدد المراقبين من قبل الأمم المتحدة؟ وهل ستكون المناطق المتنازع عليها من ضمن أولويات الأمم المتحدة للمراقبة أثناء الانتخابات؟
How many technical advisors do we have? 145? 60 international and the rest 60 national. 160 total. 160 technical advisors.
Okay. So the size of the UN support, I just needed to check one number. We have 160 technical advisors right now up and running in the country to assist IAC and relevant authorities in organizing, credible elections. In addition to that, I just explained, we have 130 short-term experts coming in to monitor in advance and on election day, supported by 600 additional staff. So there are big numbers. You will see us increasingly, obviously Iraq is a big country, but you will see us increasingly going around the country and to do, in doing our job. In addition to that, also other organizations, for example the European Union, are deploying observers or monitors or any other form of expertise. And we expect some other countries, states or organizations to come in. Also, but this is a question for IAC, so I'm not able to give you all the details, there will be a significant number of so-called domestic observers. So, as I said, the world is watching closely, here in Iraq, but also beyond. The UN, on election day you asked about, I needed to double check what had been asked, but You also asked about the disputed territories. So we have 5 regional hubs. The core team is being deployed here in Baghdad. Then we have the regional hubs in Basra, Kirkuk, Erbil, and Mosul. But at the end of the day, it's our aim to reach out to all governorates. But Kirkuk, because we know some of the sensitivities, will have our special attention, no doubt about that.
So, yeah.
No, they have interpretation live. Oh, yes, yes. No, he will do it.
Yeah, hello, I'm Dina Faridun from Kursan TV, Kurdish channel. I have 2 questions and one about women. Iraq is ready to have a female president, and second,
Yeah.
and the second question is to increase women's role in politics and high position. What do you think should be done? Also, we have women in parliament and women in government in Iraq and in KRG also. How can we prove that? And is there roles for United States in this affair? Thank you.
A female president in Iraq, that would be highly welcomed by many, but I'm not sure that any woman stepped forward as a potential candidate at this stage, but why not? I mean, it's very good to have ambitions. A long time ago, I was appointed as the first female defense minister in my country, in the Netherlands, and it's always worth trying it. I'm also the first female special representative of the Secretary General here in the country, and I know that many of the current authorities wondered why on earth is the United Nations sending a woman, but it worked out fine, they told me. So, there is plenty of opportunity for Iraqi women to put forward their candidacy for the Iraqi presidency. We would welcome that. Secondly, I just explained a bit about our ongoing activities, not only, from the UN Iraq family as a whole. So we work closely with the Women Advisory Group. We work closely with individual female decision makers and members of parliament. We have, of course, UN Women in the country that is also doing a lot. But at the end of the day, we do not have executive powers. We do not run the country. So it's also up, not only to the women themselves, because they will have to fight a lot, but to all the political forces and the current leadership to allow women not only to become a member of parliament, but also to get her voice heard. And here I feel that there is still lots of work ahead of us.
عفوا حازم محمد حبيب من جريدة الصباح وكالة الأنباء العراقية الرسمية. سؤالي هو كيف تنظر الأمم المتحدة إلى حجم الحراك الحكومي باتجاه إقامة الانتخابات في موعدها المحدد؟ وهل ترون أن الحكومة جادة وقادرة على إجراء انتخابات نزيهة وشفافة وبعيدة عن التزوير؟ شكرا.
I think that the commitment of the Iraqi government is genuine with regards to the elections to be held on October 10. Also, there is no way that it would be possible to postpone the elections now. I mean, we're only, as I said, the clock is ticking, only 5 weeks ahead of the elections. We are, but as many others are investing millions and millions and millions of dollars, taxpayers' dollars, to make credible elections possible. So to delay or postpone, at this stage, that would be irresponsible in my view. Also, it is important for any government to be predictable. You cannot announce a date and then change it just a few weeks in advance. Having said that, the commitment of this government is genuine. This government turned to the United Nations and asked for monitors to monitor election day, determined to make credible elections happen because many of the authorities are perfectly well aware of the fact that a repetition of the events in 2018 will create lots of trouble in the country. So yes, they are committed, and let's hope it stays that way in the next weeks ahead of us.
السلام عليكم. أباقير مهدي وكالة الأنباء الألمانية DBA. سؤالي: هل تعتقدون أن الانتخابات الحالية قد تعزز وتضيف شخصيات قوية تدير العراق نحو الأفضل وتنهي مأساة الشعب العراقي؟
It's a good question because obviously elections are never a goal in and of themselves. This is also what I emphasized in New York. It is, however, an important milestone, and it's important for Iraq to move beyond elections to get things done. What comes next, obviously, is a very critical phase, the phase of government formation. And then, if we have a government in Iraq, it's another critical moment, because will this government have enough room and flexibility to kickstart the desperately needed reforms? So this is, it's the elections are just, as I said, a very, very first step at a very, very long road. But these elections are important.
وكذلك ايضا ما تعليقكم على اكتشاف المزيد من هذه الشبكات الخاصه بتزوير الانتخابات. الشق الثاني يتحدث عن قضيه المساءله والعداله، لماذا لم تكشف هذه الامور للراي العام لغايه الان؟
But there's some accountability on this, or about assassination?
No, it's on this.
Okay. So you are referring to some of the recent statements that all of us have been able to read. What I can say about that is that investigations are ongoing, that so far we do not have any evidence that systems or processes have been compromised. But again, investigations are ongoing. The statement, in my view, should also be, you could read it as a deterrent. So to warn parties, we are watching you, don't go ahead with whatever you have in mind. But again, I need to refer to the ongoing investigations. And in my introductory remarks, I already referred to the fact that, far-reaching intimidation of candidates and voters, for example, by releasing all kind of information, it is not on. So it must stop. And I think if you read the statements, the recent statements within that context, you understand what's going on. But again, investigations are ongoing. And as soon as there are any results, then we obviously will be able to share that with you as well.
السلام عليكم. صالح مراسطان السومري. تحدثتم عن إجراءات مشددة للحفاظ على عملية انتخابية وضمان نزاهتها من عمليات التزوير، ربما فيما يتعلق ببطاقات الناخب، بيع وشراء الأصوات ومقاعد الجماهير. واتخذت هل يمكن أن يكون زيادة عدد المراقبين الدوليين في الأمم المتحدة على الأرض العراقية لمراقبة العملية الانتخابية جزء من هذه الإجراءات، خاصة أن هناك مطالبات من الجنوب الأمريكية في الوقت السابق بهذا العدد بزيادة أعداد المراقبين إلى مصاحب وبين الانتخابات.
I just gave you the maximum people we can deploy. We got our mandate late in the day at the end of May, and we're doing whatever we can within a very short period of time. The UN, as I said, does not have executive powers, does not run the country, but we are, not only the UN, but many others are watching events closely, meaning that we will be on top of things. Are there such things as guarantees? The answer is no. There is no guarantee in Iraq, nowhere else in the world. But having said that, I do think that these elections have the potential to be different than the elections in 2018, as I just said in my introductory remarks. But again, it's not a given, so everything and everybody will have to be with us and the Iraqi people to make this possible.
السلام عليكم. من قناة تحية تدعون الكتل السياسية وممثلي الكتل إلى عدم فهل تعتقدون أن هناك جهات سياسية فعلا هي تحاول تتدخل في الأمور وكيف يكون في إيقافها؟
Well, what we do know is that in 2018, political parties did interfere and did distort, force, or shape the election results. What we're doing now is to design processes, I mean, in support of IAC, again, we are just supporting and advising, is to organize the processes and systems in such a way that this is no longer possible. So this is one of the, measures to mitigate the risk of, again, political interference in the results of the elections. And things, we conducted our last simulation exercise, when was it?
About 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. And things look good. I mean, as always, as in any country, you always have flaws that you need to address at the very last moment. But in general, I have to say things look good. But again, no guarantees. So that's why we're here. Not only us with monitors and supporting staff, but also the European Union, other organizations, including domestic observers.
السلام عليكم. سجاد الموسى من العراقية الإخبارية. طبعا لو نتحدث عن المساعدة الفنية بالنسبة لبعثة الأمم المتحدة، هناك أكثر من 3 مليون بطاقة ناخب حاليا متواجدة في مراكز التسجيل. لا توجد خطط أو أمور جيدة لتوزيع هذه البطاقات. 3 مليون ناخب ربما أكثر من عدد سكان دولة مجاورة. كيف تساعد الأمم المتحدة المفوضية في توزيع هذه البطاقات لا سيما بدأ يعني يقصر من الوصول إلى يوم الانتخابات.
Could you, I think you asked 2 things at the same time, right? So could you split it in 2? One question was about the electronic voting cards, am I right? And what they will do with the cards that are not being used. This is what I said in my introductory remarks. They will be destroyed anytime soon, today or tomorrow.
هناك 3 مليون بطاقة بيومترية لمحددين سابقين لم توزع حتى الآن على الناخبين. هذا العدد كبير. هل تساعد الأمم المتحدة فنيا المفوضية بإيجاد بدائل وخطط لتوزيع هذه البطاقات قبل موعد الانتخابات؟ شكرا جزيلا.
Those who have not been distributed, people can still collect.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
they will not vote. Yeah. Okay. So no, I mean, with all due respect, but IAC cannot create miracles on its own. So citizens are also required to step up and to collect their voting cards. This is still possible, and we still have 5 weeks. So I can only urge the people to collect their voting cards. If they're not collected, they cannot be used. That is obvious. For not going what?
Some people are threatened not to vote or urged to not to.
Look, in general, so what you're saying is that some people are being threatened not to vote. Is that your question? Okay. Again, here, there is also a public responsibility. So those parties, as I said, IAC can do a lot, but cannot do everything on its own. So there is also a role for the Iraqi government, other authorities, the UN, Iraqi people themselves, to step up and not to allow any form of intimidation. Whether it's intimidation not to vote, whether it's suppression or intimidation to vote for a certain candidate, it is just not unacceptable. So if you have very, concrete examples, because we need to go beyond storytelling, you are most welcome to share it with us. But let me be clear, if we have sufficient evidence on people being intimidated not to vote or to vote for a certain candidate, our door is open.
السلام عليكم. باسمة عامر من وكالة سمع العراق الدولية. هل بالإمكان تقديم ضمانات على عدم تزوير الانتخابات في ظل وجود المراقبة الأممية والدولية؟ وكيف تقيم الأمم المتحدة هذا الجانب؟
Well, this is a question that I kind of answered already, but I'm happy to answer again, is to respond again, is that obviously the UN cannot give guarantees. We would like to give guarantees. Are you there? Yes. We would like to give guarantees, but it doesn't work like that. It's the same in any country, also in Iraq. So I listed some of the measures and I listed some of our efforts to contribute to credible elections. We do think that with all the measures in place and with the ongoing efforts that these elections have the potential, again, I cannot emphasize it enough, these elections have the potential to be different from the elections in 2018. But I also call on all candidates, political forces and voters themselves not to allow any illegal intentional action that could influence the outcome of the election process. Yeah, what can I say? There are no guarantees in life, never, but we are doing everything we can.
السلام عليكم. وليد إبراهيم من قناة الجزيرة. كنتم هنا في العام 2018 لما جرت الانتخابات الماضية كبعثة الأمم المتحدة بالعراق، وحدث ما حدث في الانتخابات الماضية من خروقات تحدثت أنت قبل قليل عنها، لا أريد أن أخوض في تفاصيلها. ماذا لو حدث أو لو تكرر هذا السيناريو في هذه الانتخابات؟ ماذا نتوقع دوركم؟ هل سيكون كما حدث في المرة الماضية أن اعترفتم بهذه الانتخابات أم نتوقع أن الأمم المتحدة هذه المرة لن تعترف بشرعية هذه الانتخابات إذا وقعت خطوات أثرت على النتائج؟ وإذا سمحت لي أن ما بعد الانتخابات في الكتلة البرلمانية الأكبر برلمان البلوك، هل نتوقع أن نشهد جدلا آخر مثل الذي حدث في المرات الماضية أم أن هذا الموضوع قد حسب مفهوم الكتلة البرلمانية الأكبر؟ كيف سيتم تعطي هذه البرامج؟ شكرا.
On the largest bloc issue, you will have to ask this question to the political parties because the United Nations is not best placed to comment on that. Honestly, it's a very political question. On what happened in 2018, the role of the United Nations back then was very different. We had some technical assistance, but not to the extent that we are providing for at this stage. We did not have monitors and supporting staff in the country. We had no mandate by the Security Council or whatsoever. So the role of the United Nations is very different. Now, I am aware, I was not in the country in 2018, but I am aware of what happened in 2018, and I'm also aware of the perception with regards to the UN role at the time. It is as if the UN rubber-stamped the outcome of the elections. Now, let me be clear on on the upcoming October elections. The elections also this time around are Iraqi-owned, Iraqi-led, but with our technical assistance and with monitoring, not only by the UN, but also by the EU and others. Meaning that there is no such thing as the UN or EU or somebody else to certify the elections, because that is an Iraqi responsibility. But I am determined not to give legitimacy to the outcome of elections that are just obviously rigged. So I do whatever I can together with the many people we have on the ground to make sure that these elections can be and will be recognized as credible. Something that we need to bear in mind is that I noticed in the many conversations in the country is that many people talk about winning the elections. Very few talk about losing the elections. But elections is about winning and losing. So if you lose the elections and the process was recognized as credible, it's also important to accept the outcome of the elections and not to refer to, oh, you know, because we lost, the process was rigged. So it will be sensitive. But again, I emphasize, the UN, UNAMI, myself, I will not give legitimacy to the outcome of the elections if they are not recognized as credible.
عليكم أحمد المسلوي مراسل قناة العهد الفضائية. سؤالي لكم، المراكز الانتخابية والقاعات أو المحطات ستكون كبيرة جدا في العراق. هل ستكون الأمم المتحدة متواجدة في كل الأوقات خلال اليوم الانتخابي وفي جميع المحطات، وكيف سنضمن أن لا تكون هنالك ضغوطات على بعض الناخبين المتواجدين في مراكز الانتخاب؟ وأيضا هل ستكون الأمم المتحدة متواجدة أيضا خلال العد والفرز الإلكتروني بالإضافة إلى التواجد في المحطات الانتخابية؟ شكرا جزيلا.
We will be covering 5%.
Yeah, I know, but the counting will be present.
Yes, we'll be present.
Okay, let's first go to the voting process. Yes, we will be present. So this is one. Secondly, we will not be able to be present at all polling stations because there are over 11,000
polling centers.
Polling stations.
8,000, 53,000 polling stations.
Oh yeah, 53,000 polling stations. You can imagine. If I would deploy 53,000 people, I would need billions to make that happen. So this is not going to happen. But we will make sure that we are present together with colleagues from the European Union and other observers. And there is obviously an exercise ongoing to identify in which polling stations you will see UN presence. But as in any country, it's impossible to be present in 53 stations.
Channel, will the role of your crew will be limited to monitoring or supervising?
No, we have to be very clear, and that's why I just said these elections are Iraqi-owned, Iraqi-led. The United Nations, nor the European Union, nor any other country or state or organization will conduct the elections on behalf of Iraq. Again, Iraq is in the lead. We are advising, assisting to the maximum extent we can. We will be deploying monitorings, but we're not in the business of certifying the elections. But again, if they are rigged, don't turn around to us and ask us to rubber stamp or give the perception to the Iraqi people that everything is fine, because this will not happen. Okay? Yes, that's what I referred to in my introductory remarks and just now. Not acceptable. So to put pressure on candidates by releasing all kind of videos, photos, information, to make them turn to their constituents and to make them vote for another candidate, this is not on, and investigations are ongoing, as I said. Are we done?
مرحبا.
Oh.
سيف الدين إبراهيم أتحدث اليوم. هل هنالك حزب أو كتلة تدعمها الأمم المتحدة للحصول على رئاسة البلاد؟ والشطر الثاني ما هي المهام التي ستقوم بها الأمم المتحدة؟
السؤال مرة ثانية، السؤال الأول.
هل هنالك حزب أو كتلة تدعمها الأمم المتحدة للحصول على رئاسة البلاد؟ والشطر الثاني ما هي المهام؟
Let me finish this one first. No. There is no way. There is no way that the UN will have any fingerprint on any candidate or any party. Just to be very, I mean, we are impartial, so we do not take sides.
ما هي المهام التي ستقوم بها الأمم المتحدة خلال الانتخابات وبعد الانتخابات في عملية العد والفرز؟
The counting process is in hands of IHEC, but we will be there. And as I said, it's going to happen. It will be published. All of it will happen real time. So it's very different from what happened in the past. For your reassurance. Any other questions? Look, turnout, obviously, that's why I'm also very clear about, those who call for a boycott of the elections. Turnout is important, voter turnout. But we cannot impose or force people to vote. I can only encourage them, because if you do not cast your vote, you will give it to those that you most likely oppose. So use your vote. See it as a very first step to participate and shape your own future. It's, you know, your country, your future, your vote, as I said. The question was, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, the results. So the voted turnout, to be clear, is not, there's no threshold that would kind of boost the credibility of the elections. And this is important because if the voted turnout is 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50% or, you know, higher, we will not use it, honestly. So I can only urge everybody to go and, you know, cast your vote.
Simona Houghton, PBS NewsHour. Thank you for doing this, first of all. So in the interest of transparency, because you mentioned that you will not rubber stamp or legitimize a rigged election, wouldn't it be important to make public your findings? Because my understanding is, and I may be wrong, that
To make public what?
the findings of the mission. I understand that the arrangement is that those will be reported to the UN Security Council. Can you explain what will be made public and what will be reported to the Security Council, and whether those findings will be available to the public so that they can understand?
The report will be public, as is any Secretary General report to the UN Security Council. So if I will report in person to the Security Council also, you will see that there is a public statement. There is always a session behind closed doors. But what is relevant, because, you know, sometimes it's easier to talk openly behind closed doors. But it will never be very different from what has been said publicly. So the report, the written version, will be public 30 days after the elections latest. The EU has a different but similar procedure. Also, they will put forward recommendations and this kind of things. So most of the information, and if not all, will just be public, because there is no reason for me to hide, you know, information if it's obvious that it forced another outcome of the elections.
كيف التعامل المفوضية مع الأشخاص الذين أتلفوا بطاقاتهم الانتخابية وسيزودون بطاقة جديدة؟
No, how was
ممكن تعيد السؤال مرة ثانية لو سمحت؟
How was I dealing with those who destroyed their voting cards?
كيف تتعامل المفوضية مع الأشخاص الذين أتلفوا بطاقاتهم الإلكترونية وسيزودون بطاقة جديدة؟
I don't get your question. I'm so sorry, because I mean, why did they destroy their voting cards? And it's too late, by the way. Now it's too late. So if you did not get your act together by now, you will miss the opportunity to vote. Again, there is also responsibility. I mean, citizenship comes, as in my own country, with rights and also some duties. I have no idea why would people destroy their voting card. So first of all, if they did, there was an opportunity to update and register themselves, and I sincerely hope that, you know, most people use that opportunity.
ميثا الإسبان رئيس تحرير جريدة اليوم. شكرا لتفاعلكم معنا للانتخابات القادمة. بس هناك طاقة سلبية قليلة جدا. أكو عزوف أكثر من مواطنين للدوائر الثلاث، يعني بالدوائر الثلاث السنية والشيعية والكردية. كيف أتعامل معهم؟
Yeah, of course. Look, I said, I mean, the calls for, you know, not to participate in elections vary because of loss of hope, frustration, anger, and disillusionment. And disillusionment for a number of people in the country is very well understood by the United Nations. But by not voting, it will not be solved. And again, elections, you know, it's not like the next day that you will immediately see miracles in the country. But the elections are a very first and necessary step. And use that step. And use your vote. This is the only thing I can emphasize time and again.
السلام عليكم، سعاد جعفر مخبري صحفية في جريدة الدستور. هل هناك تعاون مشترك بين العراق والأمم المتحدة بشأن حماية النازحين في المخيمات من أجل أن الأذى عنهم كيف يتم الحماية؟ وشكرا.
Yes, of course. I mean, we have, as you know, the United Nations in Iraq. Sorry. Yes. So, yeah. So the IDPs are part of the so-called special voting process, or they will take part. I should say they are not part. They will take part in the so-called special voting process on the 8th of October. Secondly, we pay lots of attention to the IDPs. Also because in the past, in 2018, for instance, there were some issues, to put it mildly. Does that mean that they do not face obstacles, or they did not face obstacles in registering themselves? Yes, they did. But we tried to provide as much as information as we could. And not only us, but also IHEC has a number of outreach activities that are planned in the next weeks to make sure that IDPs will use their right and to cast their vote.
السلام عليكم. قصي دليني وكالة صوت العرب الإخبارية. عفوا، من خلال حضوركم للعراق ومن خلال خبرائكم، هل هناك خطط لازمة وضعتموها للسيطرة على ملفات التزوير اللي راح تحصل خلال الانتخابات؟ وشكرا.
Well, you know, fraud, to prevent fraud, I mean, I listed a number of measures just now in my introductory remarks and in my response to some of the questions that are, you know, that are there, and the ongoing efforts to mitigate and prevent fraud. Again, if you ask me, are there guarantees? No, but that is the case in any country, also in Iraq. But what we say time and again, I mean, somebody said you're so optimistic. I'm hopeful, because with all the efforts ongoing, with all the measures already in place, these elections, again, have the potential to be different than the elections in 2018.
السلام عليكم. يوسف سلمان، الوكالة الوطنية العراقية للأنباء. سؤالي يتعلق فيما يخص عن الدور الأممي للجهات الأممية في يوم الاقتراع وكذلك المراقبين الدوليين. هل سينتهي هذا الدور بانتهاء عملية الاقتراع وإعلان النتائج؟ نحن نعرف أن هناك خطوات أخرى تتبع إعلان النتائج، من ضمنها المصادقة على المرشحين، بعض الطعون الانتخابية التي ممكن أن تقدمها بعض الكتل أو الأفراد أو الكيانات حول صحة النتائج الانتخابية.
The official complaint system is obviously in control and by IHEC, and has to be. Again, they are, you know, we are not running the country, we do not have the executive powers, but we assisted IHEC in designing the procedures, and we will also assist them in the follow-up of the complaints. Your first questions I did not really get. Your first question was about whether the role of the UN stops after the elections. You want us out?
No. Would it stop there or not?
No, it will not stop there, because first of all, our mandate is being renewed on a yearly basis, and there are lots of things that we would be, you know, ready to assist Iraq and the Iraqi people to improve things, even do. Yeah.
I think so.
So what is the question? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for being with us today. And please, again, dear members of the press, we also count on you in accurate reporting. Stick to the facts. We will be most grateful. Thank you so much. Yeah, no.
Yes. How are you? This is water if you want.
1 minute. Today. Thank you. What I learned from her, good thing, this election has the potential to be different from the past.